Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
So good morning. Well, this is a different morning. We're now going from 6 to 9 instead of 5 to 8. But we still have some of our spectacular, well, let's call them stars. He is certainly a celebrity in his own right, and you've heard him before. Darwin Porter calling in from Staten Island. I'm Anita Finley, and let's get started. Good morning, Darwin.
Good morning, Anita. I'm talking to you from the shivering Northeast.
I saw that this morning. My goodness. You poor thing. Well, I've told you to come down here.
You're down there going to the beach every day and having the great life.
Well, you already had it, so it'll be boring for you anyway.
Anita, let's talk about something other than Washington. I can't turn on the TV news without Washington, so I want to talk about the absolute horror going on in Buckingham Palace in London.
Yes, that is really something with Prince Andrew, isn't it?
I know quite a bit about that because I think I told you one of my sidelines and over the years is studying the kings and queens of England, particularly the royal family in the 20th century. You know, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. I just got off on all that. And England was my first travel book, so I got to go there 2 or 3 times every year and got to meet Princess Margaret on 3 occasions. I got to see the Queen. I never actually shook her hand. But I want to talk about Prince Andrew, and this is like nothing I've really seen. Are you familiar a bit with the scandal revolving around him?
Oh, I've been watching it very closely. It is amazing what's happening there.
Yeah, it really is. And for those maybe who are not familiar with it, he gave Prince Andrew was a very good friend of Jeffrey Epstein, who committed suicide in August in his prison cell because he had been arrested on as a pedophile. Now, people in Florida remember that in 2008 he was also arrested and jailed, and but that was a pretty light sentence, and instead of cutting off the contact then, Mr. Epstein was out, and when Prince Andrew arrived in New York in 2010, he went and stayed with Epstein, which didn't look good, really. But now he gave this interview on the BBC, and he said, well, you know, the man introduced me to a lot of powerful people, but the British press responded negatively because they wanted him to express some chagrin at the young girls, the victims, and he didn't. And now Prince Charles, who is now referred to in the British press as King in Waiting.
I didn't know that.
He was in New Zealand, and he's beginning to take more charge. His mother is 93 years old. That didn't stop her. I mean, she went to 300 events last year. That's an incredible schedule. I mean, that would tire out a 20-year-old. But the Prince Charles demanded that she cut off Prince Andrew.
Oh.
And, I don't know of that ever happening. And she ordered him out of Buckingham Palace, where I think he had a suite there, and office space, and 7 secretaries.
Well, the other thing, Darwin, that I read is, then I thought she was doing this, but whomever was doing this, all the other titles of all the other people, other than the direct people, are not to be discussed, or they've lost their titles or something. What about that?
You mean members of the royal family?
Yes.
Well, no one has lost their titles.
Well, they've lost something, though. I read where all the others, other than the direct people, are not to be discussed or invited or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm with you on that. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I thought you meant the royal titles. For example, Prince Charles has issued a thing that he wants to cut down the royal family.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
That's what I meant.
But
yes.
A lot of that hasn't happened yet. It began with the royal family is considered too big. And, for example, Princess Margaret started it. She did not want titles passed on to her children. And Prince Anne has not put titles on to her children. And this is taking people off the royal treasury. Now, Prince Andrew gets a stipend, they call it, of £320,000 a year. That's from the royal treasury. But he, for many, many years, was the trade envoy representing Britain, and so he got another $620,000 in expenses every year because it involved all that world travel. Well, at the end, that's a lot of money going out, and at the end, the trade minister of trade asked him how much business had he brought into Britain after this huge investment, and he couldn't think of a thing. So it appears that he, in addition to this pedophilia scandal, that he has been enriching himself. For example, he got involved in a sort of a waterworks deal in one of those Soviet bloc old countries in the East, and he got a $4 million pound commission for that. And so there are all sorts of deals apparently that's been going on. And I'll give you another example. When he married Sarah Ferguson in 1986.
Oh yeah, that was a deal.
That was a. By the way, they're still friends. The Queen gave them an estate outside London called Sunny Hill Park, and huge, sprawling mansion. And they lived there. Even after their divorce, they lived in separate quarters. And the prince wanted to get rid of it and move on, and he had put it on the market for $15 million. Well, he not too long ago sold it for $19 million. This son of a Russian oligarch gave him an extra $4 million. Now, I've never heard of a real estate deal where you ask $15 million. Usually they'll say, "I give you 12." Right. But they added an extra $4 million onto the price, and of course the Russian didn't want it, and he let the place just fall in and had it torn down. But so all these deals have been going on, and he and Fergie, we call her, they purchased a Swiss chalet in Verbier. I used to go there every year because I did Frommer's Switzerland, and they dumped $17 million into this. So all these money deals are coming out now, and it all started. It's like you open an envelope or something. It doesn't always contain what you think it will contain. So Prince Andrew is just really being excluded from the royal family.
People, I think, Darwin, should know that he is the brother of Prince Charles. Is that not true?
Yes, he is.
So he's right up there. He is absolutely right up there. So this is very serious.
Yes, it is. And now, usually, in all the years, I worked in England for 50 years, and all those years they were very, very careful about not coming down hard on the royal family. But now they're making tabloid headlines. I'll give you an example. I wrote I wrote about the affair in my book on the Gabor sisters, about Zsa Zsa's affair with Prince Philip. Now, that was well known. In fact, Zsa Zsa talked about it on the Merv Griffin show. Hmm. And so it wasn't exactly a secret. And the British distributor said, I can't carry your book in the British Isles because of it will upset the Queen.
Is that right? Oh, my.
I got rid of that distributor, and 2 days later, my publisher, Danforth Press, got another distributor immediately. But I'm showing that sensitivity. Now, the new headlines, and it's in the second coming headlines, it's called, they make things kicked out of Buckingham Palace, shame on you, Andrew. There's one that read, I'm sorry, Mummy.
Oh, my gosh.
And big blasting headlines, outcast. Now, we don't have to be sorry for him losing all of his royal money because he's got money of his own. Now, I don't think he needs that money from Britain anymore. And the latest news now is he and Fergie, they're still together. I'm not talking about romantically, but they still have this liaison, and they have 2 daughters, and they've taken the Royal Lodge at Windsor Great Park. Now, I've been by there. This is where the Queen Mother, the mother of the present Queen Elizabeth, I'm sure you remember her, the Queen Mother.
Yes, yes.
This is her home, and she lived there. I think she lived to 102 years old, and they've had to put 10 or 12 million into restoring it. The one thing that's coming out that is absolutely surprising is something is happening to Fergie. She still has the title of the Duchess of York, but she was given £3 million at the divorce settlement. Now, a discreet person could have lived very happily the rest of her life on that money, but she ended up in £5 million in debt, which means she's gone through £8 million. It makes me wonder, how did she do that?
Yes, what's she spending it on?
What is she could buy the entire guards at Buckingham Palace for that.
Let me tell everybody who's just tuned in, I'm talking to Darwin Porter, who is an author and a celebrity writer and expert, and he and I have, of course, been doing these interviews once a month for many, many years, and also he writes an incredible article column every single month. Be sure to read it. So I do have a question for you. I know it sounds very simple, but here's Prince Andrew. He could have had anybody he wanted. Why did he have to do that? What is it with men who do something like that? Is he a big drinker? Was he on drugs? What made him?
No.
Okay,
no,
what was it?
I think my old grandmother used to say, every family has a bad seed.
I see.
And he just happened to have a love of money and also a love of women. I will tell you a story you haven't read in the paper. I used to do a yearly book on the Caribbean, and in the summer of July 1982, I was visiting the island of Moustique, which is part of the Grenadines, and this is where Princess Margaret had a home. And this was where Andrew was there. We saw him running up and down the beach with a beautiful woman named Koo Stark, and she turned out to be, shall we say, a star of XX-rated films.
Oh, I see.
And he even took Koo to meet the Queen, and apparently that went off rather beautifully, although I don't think the Queen wanted Prince Andrew to marry a porno star. And but while on Moustique, I found out a shocking story that I've never seen in the press yet. Prince Andrew was sent to fight in the Falkland Wars. You know, when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, which is a remote outpost. It's off the coast of Argentina, and Argentina claimed that it was part of their natural terrain, and the British sent in warships to battle Argentina for the Falkland Islands.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. Big deal. It wasn't a big war, but was Prince Andrew then involved? Because that's where he went?
Yes, he was on one of the warships. Now, while I was on Mustique, and as I said, I went there for years, and they got to know me, and I talked to the chief of police on the island, and he said, we have just found out something very unusual, and I don't think Prince Andrew knows this, but he said, there was a plot originated in Buenos Aires, and they were sending 3 hitmen to Mustique to kill Prince Andrew.
No kidding.
As a revenge. I never saw any publicity on that, and I never went back and made a headline out of it. But he could have been killed had not the police on Mustique stopped him. Argentina surrendered, but they still won't. They were mad. They wanted revenge, and their revenge was to kill the royal prince. Oh, now the plot gets a little thicker. Now, this is a bipartisan show, so we will mention 2 presidents who got into trouble, and one was Bill Clinton, and he was a friend of Jerry Epstein, and the other was Donald Trump, who was a good friend of Mr. Epstein. And now, right before he flew back early from London, the president was asked about his relationship with Prince Andrew. And I don't know how this happened, but our president said he didn't know Prince Andrew.
I know. I did see that, and then I did see pictures of him with him.
Yes. Well, he didn't know it. I know a little bit more about that. In June, Prince Andrew had a breakfast for him and our First Lady at Clarence House, and then they drove over to Westminster Abbey, and they went on a tour of Westminster Abbey. But their relationship goes back long before that. I saw them. I went to the Manhattan's Hotel Hudson for a gala event in the year 2000, and Prince Andrew was there, laughing and talking. They were in a huddle. I saw him in a huddle with Jeffrey Epstein and Mr. Trump, who was a real estate agent at the time, a real estate developer is the word. And so they certainly knew each other then. And not only that, but I found out that Prince Andrew made a trip to Mar-a-Lago.
No kidding.
And so there were all sorts of ways of saying, oh, I hardly knew him, or it was odd that the president didn't choose to say something other than I don't know him, because the millions of people now know that. So the British press is making a whole lot out of that denial. I know a lot of people don't want to know Mr. Epstein. Mr. Clinton is saying he hardly knew him, and a lot of people hardly knew him. But oddly enough, Prince Andrew really admitted that he benefited from the relationship without talking about the victims, and that's what all the trouble is. Now, more trouble. Poor Fergie. I mean, she's got all these stories are being revived where she tried to. A reporter from Italy trapped her. He wanted to get connections with Prince Andrew, and she said, for £500,000, I can get you access to Prince Andrew, and it was just a setup. He lost 40,000 pounds because he gave her that on account, and then he exposed her. He went to Rome and exposed her that she was taking a bribe for introductions to Prince Andrew. But it's just like one thing after another.
Yeah.
But it appears that Prince Charles is ready, king in waiting, they're calling him. He is ready to assume control, and he wants to protect the monarchy now than he does want to protect his brother. And I think I understand that. And the Queen, too, I think is following the advice of Prince Charles, because she, too, wants to protect the monarchy. And then there's a rumor in the London papers that as soon as he becomes king, Prince Charles is going to send Prince Harry and his bride on a 2-year tour of the Commonwealth to get them out of London, because I think we mentioned it once on the air. You know, the Prince William and his Duchess and Prince Harry and his Duchess are feuding with each other.
Interesting, isn't it? But I think the thing with Prince Andrew is could take the monarchy down if he doesn't do something with it, or they don't. I mean, this is really, it's actually, when you look at the magazines and newspapers, it's bigger than any of the Trump things that he does. It's
Yeah. I think he just had this fatal flaw. But he was also he's had an outrageous life. I was once watching on the ABC Diana Sawyer TV show, and she had Fergie on, and it was at the time of her divorce, and she said, so the marriage didn't work out. What was the problem, Duchess? And Fergie said, well, I had to share him with 27 concubines.
That's terrible, and we've just run out of time. But that's a good way to leave this. We're going to be watching, though, for all the other things that are happening, and we really do appreciate so much that you're able to tell us things that we're not seeing in the news. But, Darwin, it's always such a pleasure, and thank you. You really filled in a lot of the holes there about him.
So Prince Andrew missed the bullet in Mystique, didn't he?
Right. Thank you. To be well and stay inside. Don't freeze your you-know-what off.
Okay.
Thank you, Darwin. All right, bye.